This chilling CCTV footage shows moments before a horrifying crime that would shake the entire county of South Africa. Two university students, Hannah Cornelius and Cheslin Marsh, were going home from a night out with friends when they were ambushed by 4 men. What followed next was an 11-hour horrific ordeal that would leave one of them dead and the other one scarred for life.
Doen dit aan iemand anders. Hy het ons niks vir julle gemaak nie.
On count 6, the rape of Hannah Cornelius, accused 1, is sentenced to life imprisonment.
But who were the monsters behind this vile crime, and why did they target them? Let's explore. Hannah Cornelius was born on February 12, 1996 in Cape Town, South Africa. She grew up in a loving and stable home with her parents, Willem, who was a magistrate, and Anna, a lawyer. She also had a brother, Andre, who was 3 years her junior and was diagnosed with severe autism in his early years. Hannah was described as kind, intelligent, and very hardworking. She was very close with her family, particularly her grandmother, whom she would spend a lot of time with. Although she came from a pretty well-off family and could get everything she wanted, Hannah never took anything for granted and was never spoiled or materialistic.
She was very sweet, she was very respectful, very kind, very empathic, generous emotionally, and great things. Loved her family. She mostly wanted to be at home. Very much a daddy's girl in that sense, and she was very much like her dad and loved both her parents. And she'd have to do her homework, but then she'd come down and she'd ask questions about the most random things. And then we'd say, okay, go back and study. And then she'd come back and say, but what about this and that? Almost too sweet.
When she was around 16 years old, her mom had taken her on a trip to India. Shortly after, as her birthday was nearing, her parents asked her what she wanted for her big day. Instead of wishing for a lavish party or an expensive gift, like most normal teens, she said that she didn't feel good spending all that money on herself and having an elaborate birthday bash when there were so many people around her living in abject poverty. So her alternative birthday plan was to create gift bags for the children in the nearby Red Hill informal settlement. And once these packs were made, she went with her gardener to hand them out. This would also be how she would spend all of her birthdays that she spent at home. Hannah did very well in school, excelling in drama and showing exceptional talent in playing the piano. Upon graduation, she secured 6 distinction grades, displaying her hard work and intelligence. Shortly after she had turned 18, her parents offered to buy her a brand new car. I mean, that is surely one of the most exciting things that could happen in a young adult's life. But instead of choosing a fancy new vehicle, which I'm sure she could have easily gotten, she decided that she would be happy with her grandmother's 1984 Volkswagen City Golf. Her grandmother at the time was in her late 80s and she was no longer using the vehicle. Then, in the summer of 2015, Hannah enrolled in Stellenbosch University, where she hoped to get her bachelor degree in humanities, majoring in languages, literature, and philosophy. Her family was slightly disappointed that she had not decided to pursue a career in law, but Hannah held steadfast to her notion in her mind that she wanted to do something that could actually help people. She stayed at the Irene Ladies' Residence, which was just a short distance from the university. Hannah loved her studies and quickly adapted to university life, but despite her academic commitments, she found time to volunteer at local Tears Animal Sanctuary. Hannah's compassionate nature allowed her to make friends easily, and she expanded her social circle through her connections in various fields. It was during her second year that she formed a deep friendship with Cheslin Marsh, a fellow student studying theology.
I met Hannah through some friends. We were just in our varsities and you chill together, and then you meet people, and that's how I met Hannah. After that, we just started hanging out all the time, most of the time, because residence was literally there in houses here, so she was an energetic person. Always had something to say.
Their bond was built on dedication to their studies, and they helped each other out academically. But no one could have known the horror that they would come to endure together. On May 26, 2017, Hannah and Cheslin decided to unwind with friends and headed out for Friday evening drinks in Stellenbosch, a town east of Cape Town.
When I met Hannah, I met her at Bohemia. She was at Bohemia and I was at the Mystic Bull. So I was chilling there with my friend, and then she was next door. That was around late, it was 12, 1 o'clock night. And the clubs closed early in Stellenbosch, 2 o'clock night. So then we just walked around town.
That night began pleasantly, with laughter and a game of dominoes. windows. As the night wore on, Hannah decided it was time to call it a night. Recognizing the dangers of the streets, Cheslin offered to walk her back to Irene Girl's residence. After they reached her place safely, Hannah became concerned about Cheslin's safety and offered to drive him home in her grandmother's old blue and white Volkswagen City Golf. Cheslin lived in an apartment with his mom around 6 miles away, and unlike other students in the university, he didn't have the luxury of owning a vehicle, so his mode of transportation was his skateboard. Hannah thought it would be much safer for him if he was in a car than on a skateboard so late at night. Cheslin was a bit hesitant and told her that he'd be okay, but Hannah, being the caring person that she was, insisted on driving him, saying that it would take her no time at all to drop him off. So Cheslin eventually accepted her offer, and the two drove off towards his home. The time was 3:23 a.m. Hannah parked her vehicle on a small patch of grass while she and Cheslin said their goodbyes. The two didn't notice the 4 men walking by their car along the road. They didn't notice the group approaching their car using a nearby truck for cover, and they were completely unaware when the passenger door was suddenly ripped open and the 4 men got in, brandishing a sharpened screwdriver and a flip knife. The horrifying ordeal was captured by surveillance cameras. What followed was a terrifying carjacking incident that subjected Hannah and Cheslin to an ordeal out of a horror movie.
I saw someone there by the door. He stuck his hand through it. I think it was a screwdriver and knife. As I'm like holding his hand, someone at my side of the door opened it up and like said like, I have to like sit still, I'm gonna die. And then like when I looked back, I saw someone with a knife, like a big knife.
After taking the car keys from Hannah, one of the 4 men, later identified as Nashville Julius, left the other 3 and was no longer involved in the rest of the night's events. His role to stalk and secure a random vehicle was now complete. Meanwhile, Hannah was forced to sit between the 2 front seats. She was flanked by 2 of the assailants while Cheslin was being pinned by the 3rd in the back. All of this happened within 15 minutes and at 3:40 a.m. Hannah's Volkswagen Golf was seen on CCTV pulling out of the driveway and driving away. Neither Cheslin nor Hannah knew the night that they were in for, and sadly this was just the beginning. Hannah's car wasn't seen for around an hour, but at 4:34 a.m. it was spotted by a surveillance camera at a gas station located just outside of Stellenbosch, somewhere along the dusty road out of town.
We were just trying to evade it any way we can, like trying to tell them we could take this, take that, and just leave us, when like don't hurt us. But clearly they had a different mission in mind.
The men stopped the vehicle, Cheslin into the trunk of the car, where they frisked him for everything he had, including his jacket and shoes. As the car arrived at the station, a figure in a cream-colored jacket could be seen in the passenger seat. A surveillance camera inside the station captures one of the assailants entering the shop with a wallet. The wallet belonged to Cheslin, and the criminals had his bank card and PIN ready to make a withdrawal. But after multiple attempts to access his bank account, the man realized the PIN was wrong. Cheslin had lied to them, an action that would cost him dearly. After re-entering the car, the 5 of them continued on their journey to Crafatoan, a neighboring town where they intended to sell the car. During this horrific car ride, Hannah was compliant and cooperative. She didn't look around, argue, or try to start a fight. Instead, she sat quietly, looking straight ahead into the sprawling, dark road. The men then made several trips around the local area, stopping to frequently visit various people, which were most likely illicit substance pickups and drop-offs. During this time, Cheslin, who was still in the trunk of the car, would try and kick the hood open whenever he thought the men weren't around. Unfortunately, his efforts didn't pay off, as the hood remained shut until around 5:30 a.m. when the men suddenly stopped the car in a remote area. When asked the men why they were stopping, they told her that they were just going for a smoke break, and they'd be on their way very soon and would return her car when they got to their final destination. But that was obviously a lie. 2 of the men got out of the car and went around to the back and removed Cheslin. They hadn't forgotten about him lying to them, and they were going to make him pay.
And that's just like when they were taking me into the bushes there. And then they told me I should lay my head on a piece of brick. And that's when I realized these people are gonna take my life away.
At this point, Cheslin was sure that he was going to die. These men were going to take his life. As he got down to the ground and said his last prayers, he saw the 2 men grab bricks in their hands and aim them at him. From there, everything went blank.
In the Bible it says, if you call on me in your last times on your deathbed, I will come for you. And when I said amen, I couldn't remember anything else.
After leaving Cheslin in the bushes, the three monsters then drove to a nearby farm and dragged Hannah out of the car. They would later say that they had planned to release her there, but for some reason they chose not to. Instead, they brutally victimized her and ended her life.
This was the last place Hannah would see, as here she was taken out of the boot, stabbed in the neck, and dragged away from the vehicle. The men dropped a large rock on her head. She succumbed to her injuries and was left lifeless in the field.
When her body was discovered later that morning, she had marks and jab wounds in her neck and had fatally been injured by an 82-pound rock, which had been dropped on her head twice. The cause of her death was ruled to be blunt force trauma to the head and jab wounds. Meanwhile, a young couple was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning in their home when they heard some groaning sounds coming from outside their window. When they went to investigate, they were horrified to find a young man who appeared dazed and severely injured. It was Cheslin. Miraculously, he had survived the vicious attack.
I just saw myself full of blood. My head was paining. And the strangest thing is that I didn't forget anything. I told the police what happened. I was just telling the cops, like, please just find her, just make sure you find her. And at that time, I literally didn't know what they did to her over there.
And his mind was also very clear, as he knew that he needed to seek help for his friend. Cheslin had actually stumbled down the road to find the closest residential building. Understandably, the young couple was scared. At first, they actually thought Cheslin was a gang thug and asked him to move along. But he insisted they call the police, and soon after they realized the weight of the situation, the local police were called and Cheslin was rushed to the hospital. Hospital reports would later show that Cheslin had opened wounds and gashes on his head, and his arm was fractured. The doctors would later say he was lucky to survive the moderate to severe skull fracture. Throughout this entire time, Cheslin was constantly asking about Hannah and begging the police to go look for her. He provided a full description of the vehicle and the assailants, which allowed the police to put out an APB, A Points Bulletin. He prayed that his friend was okay and that the police would be able to find and rescue her. But tragically, it was already too late. Just 2 hours earlier at 8:30 a.m., while he was still lying unconscious in the field, Hannah's body had already been found. The news of what had happened to Hannah shook the entire country of South Africa. Her family and friends were completely devastated and demanded that the monsters responsible be caught and persecuted. The police went out in a relentless search to find the assailants. They knew they were looking for a small blue and white Volkswagen. Luckily for them, they didn't need to look for long, as the car had already been spotted throughout the late morning. The police quickly identified Hannah's car and the movements of the criminals, who callously continued their crime spree. They were spotted around town, reportedly chasing down a woman on her way to work before robbing her of her bag and her cell phone. They then disappeared for a few hours after this, but at 1 p.m. that very same day, they attacked yet another woman, this time kidnapping her. Surveillance cameras captured the blue Volkswagen pulling into a nearby Shell gas station. The woman they had kidnapped was in the back of the car. At this point, this seems to be a habit with these criminals. One of the men exited the car and made his way to an ATM and attempted to withdraw money from the woman's account. They withdrew 3,000 rand, an equivalent of $158. Thankfully, this time they let their victim go after dropping her off on a remote road. After this, they tried to pawn the car off to random strangers, not knowing that the police were already closing in on them as they were cruising around. The night began with 6 people bundled into Hannah's Volkswagen Golf, but only 2 remained. The other criminal had already been dropped off and given his share of the loot. Not long after, an undercover police car spotted the missing car driving by. As the pursuit began, a second police car joined on the chase.
This is the place. When we got here, they drove over here by this pavement. And they drove down here. Then I stopped the car there. Then I jumped out. Then I ran through this grass and chasing them.
Desperately trying to evade law enforcement, the men inside the blue Volkswagen Golf pulled into the driveway of a nearby private farm. Bystanders are seen watching from a distance as a detective quickly exits the vehicle and pursues them on foot. They continue to speed away, but fortunately, further down the driveway, a security gate blocks the vehicle path. The 2 men try to make a run for it, one sprinting and jumping into the river below. But this ultimately is in vain, as they get themselves trapped and cannot escape the many officers who are now hot on their trail, armed and ready to fire. Their sick and twisted game was now over.
As 2 warning shots, and it was just to stop them. That guy turned around and looked at me. Then I called him to stop. He cried and lay on the ground. When I look around, I noticed a lot of police officers that were arriving. They came to me and assisted me to arrest the guy.
The men arrested were later identified as 33-year-old Vernon Witbooi and 27-year-old Geraldo Parsons. After a short interview, they were more than willing to name the other 2 accomplices, 29-year-old Nashville Julius and 28-year-old Eben van Niekerk, who were arrested the next day. These were the 4 men responsible for 11 hours of terror endured by Cheslin and Hannah in May of 2018. Now, let's take a deeper look at these 4 monsters. First, we start with Vernon Witbooi. He grew up in Cape Town and only went up to 6th grade before dropping out. After that, he began working for his uncle, selling fruits and vegetables and making an honest living. But when he was 12 years old, he was sent to live with his aunt, as his mother was working extremely long hours and did not have the capacity to look after him. It was during this time that he was sent to a youth center after getting involved in petty crimes. And while there, he completed his primary education. Between 1997 and 2016, he had been convicted 16 times for various offenses, including breaking and entering, possession of narcotics, and escaping from custody. In all these instances, he was released with just a slap on the wrist. At some point in his life, Vernon joined the notorious numbers gang, the 28s, and he ranked as a colonel. It's believed that one can only enter the numbers gang, like the 28, in prison after complicated and often brutal initiation. Vernon would also go on to have 2 children and would allegedly attempt to pay for their upkeep with proceeds from his crimes. Next is Geraldo Parsons. He was born as one of 3 siblings. His father, who was a bus driver, unfortunately passed away in 2013. Geraldo was up to grade 9 in school, and it was while there that he got involved in local gang activities, leading him to eventually drop out of school. He would go on to have 3 children who, at the time of his arrest, were between 6 and 12 years old. Like his friend Vernon, he was also a member of the 28 gang, where he was ranked as a sergeant. Graphic images of naked women and slogans like "thirsty for blood" are tattooed across Gerald's body. He also had previous encounters with the law for breaking and entering and possession of stolen goods. 2 of these had come with jail time, and the other sentence was suspended. At the time of his arrest, he was working as a casual laborer at a farm where he earned an equivalent of $37 per week. Most of his income came from his crimes. Then we move to Eben van Niekerk. He was the eldest of 6 siblings and still lived with his parents when this crime happened. Both of his parents had a drinking problem, so his environment growing up was not the greatest. He also grew up surrounded by abject poverty and dropped out of school in 5th grade. At the age of 13, he developed a serious substance problem, which led him to commit multiple crimes to fuel his addiction. His work experience was incredibly limited, as he had only worked for a period of 3 months at a construction company in 2013. He was also nicknamed Cess due to his involvement in the 26 number gang. Then finally, we have Nashville Julius. Unlike his friends, he grew up in a loving and stable environment where both of his parents had his best interests at heart. They taught him to be respectful and gave him everything a child would need. However, his life trajectory took a turn for the worse when he began to hang out with the wrong crowd. He dropped out of school at 11th grade and started using addictive substances. He would later rack up 7 convictions for various crimes, including theft, possession of drugs, and breaking and entering. There was also a 5th suspect who was suspected to have taken part in some of the crimes, but he was never identified because there wasn't enough evidence. So now that you know a little bit more about these men, let's continue.
We stay in the Western Cape High Court, where the trial of 4 men accused of killing Stellenbosch student Hannah Cornelius gets underway today. The 21-year-old and her friend Cheslin Marsh were hijacked while parked outside her flat. Marsh survived the attack.
The court proceedings would finally begin against the men who took the life of Hannah and attempted to take the life of Cheslin. The evidence against them was solid. They had testimonies, confessions from both Vernon and Geraldo, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and most importantly, Cheslin.
I was just scared. I don't know why, but I felt scared. The first day actually. And then when I came home, I realized what I felt. And I questioned myself, are you feeling that way to people that wanted to kill you? So they actually bit angry then. And then the next day I went back, started looking them straight in the eyes. And like I realized that like, yo, you guys aren't gonna take my last piece of life away. You already took so much away of my life. I'm not gonna give it that last piece, definitely not.
Although this case was clearly stacked against these 4 men, only 2 of them would confess. In fact, all 4 of them pleaded not guilty to their crimes. The video of Vernon Whitboy's interview was played in court. In it, Vernon laid the blame for Hannah's murder on his 3 co-defendants. He said that his taste for a smoke led him to visit his friends, Geraldo and Eben, that night. While the 3 were smoking, they came up with the idea to go to town and see what they could find. On the way, they picked up another friend, Nashville. While patrolling the streets of Stellenbosch, they saw Hannah chatting with Cheslin in her car. Vernon said they approached the car with the idea of robbing the occupants of their cell phones and wallets. Geraldo dived through the window and seized Cheslin while Vernon got in the front and took out the keys. Nashville took Cheslin's phone and wallet and went away. The other guys put Cheslin in the car's trunk. Vernon drove with Hannah sitting beside him, planning to sell the car to Eben van Niekerk in a place called Grafentoin. When they got there, Vernon saw Geraldo had a gun. They then left to meet Julius, who Vernon called Caffertage, and bought substances like tick and daga. Vernon, Geraldo, Julius, and Eben, also known as Cess, got back in the car with Hannah in the front and Cheslin in the trunk. They started getting high. After a short distance, Geraldo stopped the car and took Cheslin into some bushes with Julius and Eben. When they came back, Geraldo said they had tied up Marsh and left him. According to Vernon, the men then stopped at a house in Grafentoin before heading back to Stellenbosch. Somewhere along the road, we stopped at a bush again. While we drove, we smoked again. At the bushes, Geraldo said that we were now going to have sex with the girl. I said I was not here for that and that I was just here for the money. Geraldo, Cess, and Cafferchi took the girl into the bushes and I stayed in the car and smoked. After a while, they came back and I saw that the girl was still busy putting her jacket on. While we were driving, Geraldo said that I missed out and that he was first and Cess was second and Cafferchi was third. At the end of a vineyard, Geraldo and the other men removed Hannah from the car and come back without her. Geraldo explained that they had tied her up and abandoned her for farm workers to discover the following day. At this part of the interview, Vernon broke down in tears. Cheslin, who listened to the interview, could not believe the lies that Vernon had told the police. It was up to him to tell the truth of what actually happened. Cheslin broke down in tears repeatedly as he told how they were hijacked and he was locked in the car's trunk while Hannah was kept inside the car. He said they had been out for a few drinks and to dance, and he said he was going to use his skateboard to get home, but Hannah insisted on driving him in case he was robbed. I lay down on the ground as they told me and put my head on a rock. I closed my eyes and prayed. The 2 men were standing over me with bricks in their hands. They had not expected Cheslin to survive. They left him there for dead. I lost consciousness, and when I woke, I was in horrible pain. Everywhere pain. When I last heard Hannah talking, her voice was very soft and I could tell she was scared. Although Cheslin survived the ordeal, he was so traumatized that he never returned to his studies and is now deaf in one ear as a result of his injuries. His vivid scars could be seen on his head as he testified.
Toen net iemand anders. Ek was niks vir julle gemaak nie.
Geraldo Parsons also took to the stand and explained that they didn't intend to kill Hannah. He alleged that the terrified 21-year-old offered to have intimate relations with the men if, in return, they wouldn't take her life. But then they took it in turn to victimize her. They then put her in the trunk of her own car and drove to a nearby vineyard, Geraldo told the court. She didn't want to climb out of the boot. She was holding on to the car. She started panicking. Eben came up and jabbed her. I let her go as the blood started to spill. Then I saw Vernon arrive with a rock. I told Vernon, don't kill her. We've already killed Cheslin. Let's leave her. But Vernon threw the rock on Hannah's head. This was the 92-pound rock found on Hannah's head. The state pathologist told the court that the violence against her skull was so brutal, it would have killed her instantly. The skull is made of very strong bones. It is not easy for the skull to break or crack unless a lot of power is used to break the skull. Throughout these court proceedings, it appeared as if these men had very little remorse for their actions. They even smiled and laughed throughout the trial. and one of them was even seen blowing his girlfriend a kiss. Ultimately, Vernon Witbooi, Geraldo Parsons, and Eben van Niekerk were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Nashville Julius, who had left earlier, received a 22-year sentence for his involvement in aiding, robbery, and kidnapping.
On count 5, the attempted murder of Cheslin Claude Marsh, accused 1, 2, and 3 are guilty. On count 6, the murder of Hannah Cornelius, accused 1, 2, and 3 are guilty. On count 7, the rape of Hannah Cornelius, accused 1, 2, and 3 are guilty.
The public cheered and applauded when the sentences were handed down.
On count 6, the rape of Hannah Cornelius, accused 1 is sentenced to life imprisonment.
As they were being led away, Geraldo and Vernon apologized to Hannah's parents, saying that they were sorry for what they did.
Uitspraak was is zo. Dit maakt shit. Enige voor ouders, enige iets? Ja, zeker, sorry. Is jammer vir wat jy baie jammer. Baie jammer. Maar is gebeur. Is 'n bietjie laat. Ja.
Eben also wrote a letter to Hannah's parents saying how sorry he was and claiming that he was scared for the other two men. The tragedy had profound effects on Hannah's family. Hannah Cornelius, Hannah's mother, was found floating in the waters of the South Atlantic Ocean. Although her death was deemed an accident, Hannah's dad, Willem, insisted that his wife had given up on her life. He believed the pain of losing her daughter was too much for her to bear. She found herself walking into the ocean and quite simply giving up. To commemorate Hannah and channel their grief, Willem and Anna established the Hannah Cornelius Foundation, aiming to help local children access education and escape community violence.
Me and my son are not a family. We are survivors who live in the ruins of what was once a family. Me and the mother were immensely proud of raising a child for the new South Africa. A child without the baggage of our generation, with little interest in money, material things, with no prejudices regarding race, religion or social standing. A remarkable child on the cusp of becoming a remarkable woman.
Sadly, Willem Cornelius was diagnosed with cancer roughly 3 months after his daughter's death. He succumbed to the illness on December 9th, 2022. After a successful crowdfunding campaign by Hannah's cousin, Cheslin Marsh got close to 30,000 Rand, equivalent to around $1,500, and received a hearing aid due to the damage left behind from the onslaught. Some of the money will also go to counseling and to his studies. The tragic death of Hannah Cornelius was a result of the cruel intentions of 4 men who cared only for themselves. Her story highlights the violence and femicide issues in South Africa, and her legacy continues through the foundation supporting young people at risk. What do you think about this case? If you were the judge, what sentence would you have given these 4 men? Let me know in the comment section, and be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button.